Now, of course, India is also heading to the polls alongside Russia and South Africa from the BRICS nations, if you like. Other non-BRICS countries that are set to go to the elections this year include the US and the UK. So how is all of this likely to affect us here in South Africa? For that perspective, let's bring in SABC News international editor, Sophie Mokoena, live to us here in our studios. Great for you to pop by, our first engagement. Thanks very much
Our
indeed.
First engagement. Thank you so much, Ayanda. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I've been having quite the time here. But
Yes.
let's get to business, because these are all such important issues, especially when you consider this perception that there may be a shift in the global order because of just how many people are heading to the polls. Help us distill why this is important for South Africa.
It is quite important because, as you pointed out, some of these countries have strong relationship with South Africa. You spoke about the group BRICS, India, quite important, and Russia, and South Africa hosting BRICS summit last year, taking certain decisions, and of course now the incoming chair is Russia, and Russia has to continue with agreements reached here in South Africa. And remember, the agenda was crafted by President Cyril Ramaphosa, so that continuity is quite important. On the other hand, we have India, a member of BRICS, but importantly, the outgoing chair of the G25, and therefore you have now G20, and Brazil is going to take over this year. And also you look at the resolutions taken in India as part of the G20 nations, President Ramaphosa playing a prominent role in pushing for the African Union to be taken as part of this group. And therefore you want to see continuity in these international decisions and policy direction, the global direction, and also the influence globally. You also have United Kingdom outside BRICS in the G20, South Africa being the only African country as a member of the G20, where you would want the G20 member countries to also support South Africa's view in relation to transformation of the multilateral institutions, including the IMF and the World Bank. And you also have the United States of America going to elections. AGOA, but also the G20, you'd want that country also to be in sync with South Africa's perspective in terms of the transformation of the multilateral institutions, but also in relation to the war in Ukraine. As you spoke to the correspondent, South Africa is playing a role behind the scenes. We know also in the Middle East, and all these big countries, some in the G20, some in BRICS, who are overlapping. You'd want synergy among themselves to ensure that we take a better direction globally. And South Africa is doing that. I know very well that the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, relies on South Africa so much when there are global challenges, because South Africa can be able to pull these countries together, even though at times at bilateral level you find a situation where South Africa might differ with other countries.
I find that so fascinating because here at home, of course, we're speaking about this being an unprecedented election where it feels everything is on the table and there's no certainty. In the event that governments here at home, or the government here at home, changes dramatically, the ripple effects, of course, could be quite substantial, including how we continue with representations at The Hague, for example, and of course, sentiment around what's taking place in Eastern Europe around Ukraine.
You are correct. When you look at the South African processes of elections, you have three scenarios. You have this coalition that was launched, or working relationship of parties who are more liberal, and almost some of them are towards the right. You also have the ANC at the center. And then you have parties who are more lenient to socialist policies and towards the left. Now, if the left is able to pull a coalition, the relationship will continue to be business as usual, particularly within the BRICS group. Right. It's secured and bilateral with the BRICS member countries like your Russia, your India, your China. If it is this more liberal, to some extent influence of the right, you are going to have changes in terms of the global relationship, particularly within the BRICS. I think within the G20, it will be business as usual, because this group has confidence in the West,
right,
like your US, your UK, and therefore that bloc, it will be intact. But with the left, that G20 bloc will be shaken a bit, because they don't believe in the power of the United States of America and the United Kingdom being shopkeepers of the world. You will see those changes. If the ANC is pulling it 50+1, it's business as usual. They will deal with those arguments and differences they have at bilateral level. But South Africa will still play an important role at the global level, trying to pull the world together, because the formation of the ANC was to unite Africa, but play an important role globally to unite the world. And they will continue with that policy. And I think it will be safe, even in terms of investment internationally. When it, on the other side, they may still be comfortable, but the fear will be that there might be instability in the country. It's not going to be that stable, political stability. If it's ANC, they know it's business as usual, but they will have concerns because there are issues where investors don't agree with the ANC. If it is the left group, that's where the challenge is with investors. But the reality is investors don't care. Business don't care. They invest in a war-torn country. They will find a way to manage this group. But if ANC is able to go either this way or this way, if it's coalitions, it will be changes here and there, but not that tremendous change,
at least
and
not,
shift.
Not at a foreign affairs level, for lack of a better term.
Yes, yes.
You know, the political machinations are one thing, but the strength of multilateralism is another. And what has emerged over the past couple of years, even as we try and find solutions to these different conflicts, is whether or not multilateralism as it exists actually works. Whether you're thinking about, for example, the amount of motions in the Security Council that have not passed because of how different countries are viewing what's taking place in the Middle East. The same could be said about what's taking place in Ukraine. I wonder whether in your mind you've been able to kind of tame the different moving parts to chart a way forward around what that might look like on the other side of these elections. Fortunately,
I observed the administration of Nelson Mandela, of Thabo Mbeki, of Jacob Zuma, and now Cyril Ramaphosa. Multilateral system has been weakened,
over time.
Over time. We are at a point that it has been paralyzed. That is why we have this protracted war in Ukraine, because the Security Council is paralyzed. They can't adopt a resolution.
Right.
Either America will veto the resolution in support of Ukraine, or China will veto the resolution in support of Russia. So it's paralyzed. You go to the current conflict in the Middle East, you even see that paralysis more, because America will veto anything that Israel is not comfortable with. On the other hand, Russia will veto anything that is not of perhaps good use, or it doesn't support Palestine. So generally, the multilateral system is facing a huge challenge. And that is why on every platform, the UN Secretary General, the Chief of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, is saying we have to do something about this situation, because it is threatening the world peace. We know that when the UN was formed after the Second World War, the intention, the sole intention of the UN, and to get the Security Council as an organ, was to ensure that we don't see another world war.
Yeah.
But look at the instability.
Yeah, that phrase, never again, was the one that was reverberating in some of those chambers. You and I could speak till the cows come home, but luckily we'll have many other opportunities
Exactly.
as we count down to the different polls. Sophie Mokoena, thanks for popping by. Appreciate your insights on the agenda. Sophie Mokoena, of course, our SABC News International Desk Editor, helping us distill the many moving parts around the elections here at home and certainly further afield.